All right, let's get into it. Today, we're talking about one of history's most electrifying and, kind of intimidating thinkers, Friedrich Nietzsche. He's a philosopher with a reputation, right? He's often painted as this dark, difficult, nihilistic figure.
And it's really not hard to see why when he drops bombshells like this one. It's probably his most famous line. And yeah, on the surface, it sounds like he's just trying to tear everything down.
And that's the popular image, isn't it? The guy with that incredible mustache who basically declared the end of everything we thought was sacred. He's often seen as the ultimate pessimist. But here's an idea. What if we've been looking at him all wrong? What if the whole point of his philosophy wasn't about destruction at all, but construction? A kind of blueprint for how to build a stronger, more fulfilled version of yourself. Let's dig into that. So first off, who was this guy? Well, Nietzsche was born in 1844, and his dad was actually a priest. He was a total prodigy, became a professor in his mid-20s, but he got sick of the academic world pretty fast. He ditched it all, moved to the Swiss Alps to write his great works, but then tragically suffered a complete mental collapse at just 44, and he died about a decade later. A short, brilliant, and really a pretty sad life.
And it was a life just filled with hardship. He didn't get along with his family, he had terrible luck with women, and his books, which we now see as classics, were almost totally ignored while he was alive. On top of all that, he was constantly sick and felt this deep, crushing loneliness. And you can almost feel it when you look at this, right? That struggle. That suffering is the very soil that his entire philosophy grew out of.
Which brings us to his absolute core idea, a big German word, Selbstüberwindung. It means self-overcoming. And this is the key to everything. For Nietzsche, the whole point of life is to become what he called an Übermensch, sort of a Superman or a great-souled person who doesn't just put up with hardship, but actually uses it to grow stronger and embrace absolutely everything life throws at them.
As he put it himself, his work was all about teaching us how to become who we really are. It's not about finding yourself, it's about forging yourself. So how are we supposed to do that? Well, Nietzsche actually gives us some pretty practical lessons.
So let's jump into lesson number 1. And it's a surprising one for sure. It's all about confronting an emotion we're all taught we should hide: envy.
Now, think about it. The traditional view, right, is that envy is a sin. It's ugly. You should be ashamed of it. But Nietzsche, he saw it completely differently. For him, envy isn't some evil flaw. It's a signpost. It's a massive, flashing clue pointing you directly toward what your soul really, truly wants. So for Nietzsche, the trick is what you do with that envy. Step 1. Figure out who and what makes you envious. Is it an artist, an entrepreneur, a friend? Okay. Step 2. Don't see them as your enemy. See them as a glimpse of your own potential. Then, step 3, you put up a heroic fight to achieve that thing you desire. And if you fail, you don't get bitter or resentful. You mourn with dignity because you know you gave it everything you had. That is self-overcoming in action. Okay, so let's see how this builds to lesson number 2, which is, well, it's even more radical. It's time to rethink the whole idea of good and evil. Nietzsche just loved to throw out provocative lines like this one, but it wasn't just to get a rise out of people. He was making a really deep point about the foundations of our morality. He argued that what we call Christian morality, he called it Sklavenmoral, or slave morality, wasn't some divine truth handed down from the heavens. He claimed it was actually invented by the weak and oppressed people in the late Roman Empire, people who just didn't have the power to go out and get what they really wanted from life. And this table right here illustrates his point perfectly. Look at the column on the left. That's what they secretly wanted: power, sex, the chance to get revenge. But they couldn't get it. So now, look at the right. They called their inability to get those things a virtue. Weakness became goodness. A lack of opportunity for sex became purity. The inability to get revenge became forgiveness. For Nietzsche, this was a brilliant psychological trick born out of pure resentment. And doesn't that sound a little familiar? It's basically reframing your weakness as some kind of moral high ground, a dynamic you could argue plays out all the time in our own culture. And this leads us right into lesson number 3. If you're really going to go after your desires and overcome yourself, you have to be willing to embrace difficulty. You have to embrace pain. Now, this sounds like another one of his wild claims, but just look at the connection. Why on earth would he lump religion and alcohol into the same category?
Well, because in his eyes, they do the exact same thing. They numb your pain. Christianity, he argued, tells you that all your suffering will be rewarded in the next life, so you don't have to fight to change things in this one. And alcohol? It just gives you that temporary, fleeting feeling that everything's fine. The outcome is identical. They both sap your will to do the hard, painful work of actually changing your life for the better. He was convinced that a truly fulfilled life requires struggle. This quote is the essence of it all. Don't go looking for comfort and safety. You should seek out challenges that are going to force you to grow. A meaningful life isn't a comfortable life. It's a dangerous, heroic one. And all of this, it brings us right back to where we started, back to his most famous statement. But now, hopefully, we can see it in a totally new light, not as a celebration, but as a deep and serious warning.
God is dead, and we have killed him. Did you ever notice that second part? This isn't some atheist shouting for joy. This is a really somber, heavy observation about the world.
So it's absolutely crucial to get this. Nietzsche wasn't cheering. He was terrified. He understood that for centuries, religion had been the thing that gave Western civilization its moral compass, its sense of meaning, its rules for how to live. And with the death of God, the slow fading of religious belief, he saw that humanity would be left with this terrifying void. Without that framework, what stops us from just drifting into chaos and meaninglessness? His answer was that culture, with a capital C, had to step up and fill that gap. He meant things like great art, philosophy, and music. They would have to replace the Bible. Why? Because they do the same kind of work. They teach us how to live, how to suffer, and how to find meaning. They give us new heroes and new guides for life.
Which leaves us with a huge question for our own time, doesn't it? In this age of endless distraction, of social media, and cheap entertainment, how do we find that deep, meaningful kind of culture that Nietzsche thought was essential for our survival? How can we use it to guide us, to build ourselves up, and to become who we really are? Nietzsche saw this crisis coming more than 100 years ago, and the challenge he left for us is now, more than ever, ours to solve.